So yeah, we're hosting this webinar, Inspiring the Future, How to Connect with Local Volunteers. So we're going to be looking at how you can connect with a range of different volunteers in your local area. So I'm keen to keep this quite informal and also interactive, so please do pop some messages in the chat as we go along. So just quickly to introduce myself, my name's Leonor. I'm Senior Coordinator for Secondary Schools at Inspiring the Future. And I'm also joined today by my colleague Rebecca, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Hi everyone, I'm Rebecca Lawrence and I'm a Schools Engagement Coordinator for Education and Employers.
Great, thank you so much, Rebecca. So firstly, just to cover what we'll be doing today. So we're going to go through how you can identify and contact volunteers from the world of work for in-person career sessions. We also have some best practice ideas and insights into how volunteers can be used in the classroom. Expectations and requirements of in-person volunteers and also teachers, and then we will have some time for questions and reflections at the end as well. So before we get started, it would be really great to hear from you if you could share sort of what in-person encounters you are arranging for this academic year. If you don't mind just sharing in the chat, it'd be really great to just hear some of the things that careers leaders and teachers have planned for this year. Okay, so we've got a few coming through. Thank you so much for sharing. So we've got community support officers. We've got ex-students are coming in to practice for medicine interviews. It's really great to have alumni join for sure. I can see NHS, Armed Forces and alumni again. So someone that had a HR day involved companies as well as their own HR academies, alumni and union reps. That sounds really interesting. So I can see careers advice and mock interviews. I can also see several universities, retail employers, degree apprenticeship speakers. Volunteer morning for sixth form, mock interviews, year 10 and year 12. Can see careers fairs, more mock interviews, having the Fire Brigade come in. This is a really nice one. We have Future Fridays, seminars on a Friday lunchtime. That's really interesting. FE colleges, NHS alumni, lots of careers fairs and mock interviews. Volunteer mentors, trained in careers mentoring business volunteers. Forces Week for year 10, work experience. Yeah, and people just looking generally for people that can give careers insight as well. That all sounds really interesting and a really sort of like great range of different activities that you guys have planned. So thank you so much for sharing. So just quickly, what I'm going to do is just give an overview on what Inspiring the Future is. So we're completely free. We're free to all state schools, colleges, as well as SEND schools, all through schools and middle schools. There is no limit to the number of staff within your school that can have an account with us, as long as they're directly employed by your school. You can plan multiple in-person or virtual encounters with some really exciting workplace volunteers. So we have a really great pool of volunteers in your local geographical area, and this can also be supported by our virtual offer as well. You can also use us to meet gaps we benchmark 3 to 7. And then finally, we do also have a range of pre-recorded resources, such as NHS Everyday Heroes, Inspiring Women Careers Chats, and Making an Entrepreneur. So these resources are 20-30-minute videos with different employers speaking about their careers. They have optional pause points for reflection as well, And these resources can just be really easily embedded into lessons. They're very flexible to use, especially if you're short on time. So next, we also have a range of different encounters that you can plan. So for example, mock interviews, mentoring, speed networking, CV workshops, careers talks, and even something like work experience. So with an activity like mentoring, you can meet the needs of individual students. You can link it to subjects and have students who are particularly interested in a specific subject or sector meet volunteers that way. Careers talks, again, could be done by subject or sector. And you can ask volunteers to talk for as little as 15 to 20 minutes on what they do and their career pathways as well. As well as something like speed networking, where students have the opportunity to meet a range of different volunteer employees, and they can ask a range of questions to them as well. So just to quickly go through some expectations and requirements. So volunteers sign up to give up their time to support career sessions in schools, so that we do ask that all your activities have a CRL focus, as this is what volunteers are obviously expecting that that they'll be talking about. Because of the nature of the type of volunteering offer that we have, volunteers sort of sign up, and the minimum requirement for them is to give up 1 hour a year. But we have really, really passionate volunteers, and many of them are more than happy to give up more than just an hour, but just so that you're aware of that commitment. So this does mean that volunteers may not be able to commit to long-term or lengthy activities, but there are ways potentially around this, especially if in schools you have flexibility of times and dates, or even recruiting sort of multiple volunteers from one sector. So we also recommend inviting around 4 times the number of required volunteers. This is just due to what we see as general availability and acceptance rates as well. If you're not meeting the number of volunteers that you require, you can always go back onto your activity and send more invites out as well. So there's no limit on how many invites you can send out to volunteers. And secondly, give clear instructions to volunteers coming into school. Who's their point of contact? Is it going to be you? Is it going to be a different teacher who's running the session? How many students they'll be delivering to? And obviously it's really important as well to make sure that you let the volunteers know about any safeguarding procedures your school has in place as well. It's also really important to prepare your students and volunteers to make the most out of your careers encounter. So in terms of preparing students, we do have a number of different resources and activities available, just with some ideas on how you can do this. We also have resources on how to brief volunteers and guides that will help you with this as well. So one way that is really useful to help prepare your students is that we have the I Could website, which is on the next page. This is just a really great website where you can find careers information. It is student-led, so students can log in themselves, have a little look around. There's hundreds of videos on different careers and volunteers talking about their career pathways as well. So I think you can just search I Could and the website will come up. So now I'm going to hand over to my colleague Rebecca, and she's just going to show you how you can use your user page, how to set up an encounter and how to search for in-person volunteers as well. So over to you, Rebecca.
Thank you very much, Leonor. If you just bear with me a second, everyone. Okay, so when I click on the home button here, this is the home page of the Inspiring the Future account that all of you will have when you have an account with us. And very briefly, on the right-hand side here are the pre-recorded resources that Leonor mentioned earlier. They're very easy to access, so you can click on this drop-down menu here and choose which one you would like to use. They all have in brackets the key stage that they are appropriate for. So for an example, I will choose NHS Everyday Heroes. Once you've added the approximate number of students that will take part, you can then add the age group of those pupils and the expected date that you wish to use this resource. When you click on the next button, it will automatically send that video resource and any student resource links to your email address. You will have those permanently and you can use that over as many times as you wish. So as Leonor said, they are really easy to slot into your curriculum whenever you need to. You could also use those as a prerequisite to any in-person activities that you'll have happening, so that you're really gearing up your students for that engagement in person afterwards. So moving on, when you click onto the Manage Opportunities button here, this page shows you any previous activities that you've had, and this is also where you're able to create new opportunities. So opportunity is a fancy word for encounter or activity. It's something based on our volunteers' language that they use as they see it as an opportunity to volunteer. When you click on Create New Opportunity and Invite, it brings up this page here. So when you're creating your activity, we always say it's best to say whether or not it's in person or virtual to make sure a volunteer understands exactly what it is they're signing up for before they've even read the description. You can then add how many volunteers that you're looking to invite. As Leonor said earlier, it's always important to invite up to 4 times as many volunteers as necessary for your activity or encounter to make sure that you're getting the most engagement from our volunteers as possible. If I were looking to have a careers insight session on one sector or a couple of sectors, I might want 3 volunteers and then invite 12 from across those different sectors. You can tick this button here if you'd like it to be a virtual event. And this drop-down menu gives you a list of potential events or encounters that you can use within our system. These you can tick whether or not you're interested in using them when you sign up, and you can go back into your update profile as well and tick on these if you are interested in having help with CVs or mock interviews. Here we have a little box that says how many sessions is a volunteer necessary for. So if you were running 1 career session in one day, they would only be needed for 1 session. If you were running a careers insight session and a mock interview session in the same day, they would be needed for 2. So that's what this box is for. Here we have the start and end date of your activity. We always suggest to input your activity into the system at least 4 to 6 weeks before it's due to start. That's so that you have the opportunity to organise your time, and volunteers have enough time to organise their time volunteering around work as well. Here we have advertised to registered volunteers. When you tick this, your activity will be available to view for all of our volunteers on the platform. They will then be able to look at the description you've added. If they're interested and think they'd be a good fit for the encounter, they can then express interest in it, and you'll be able to accept or decline their interest if you think they're able to come. You can then end your advertisement to registered volunteers with this box here. We always advise to end it being advertised to registered volunteers approximately a week before it's due to start, just so that you don't have anybody express interest last minute when you've already got everything prepared. Moving forward, we then have the age range of volunteers. This isn't visible to volunteers when they're looking at your activity or when you send out invitations. This is just for the system to view. So you can input as many or as few ages as you like. And then these filters here are often also available when you use the Search for Volunteers map. So we always advise teachers not to use the industry sector filter here, the curriculum subject filter, or any of these filters along here until you get to the description box. This is because it can be quite limiting to you if you use these filters here when creating your encounter. You would then have to come back into the encounter and edit it if you wanted to change those. Whereas when you use them on the maps, it's much easier to change, and you can change them as you're searching. We then have the description box here. To the right, there's this little box here that you can move to open this up a little bit if it's too short for you to use. And in your activity description, we always ask that you give an aim of this session. So what it is you're looking to achieve for your students. The specifics of timings and dates, but there is also a really handy resource for this on the platform that you can use to help guide you, and we'll show you where that is a little bit later on. You can then input the number of students and the number of hours that they'll be required for, and when you click on this button here, it will take you to the search map. So this is the same here when you click on Search for Volunteers, and we've chosen a school at random here. So this is a school in Liverpool that we're looking at the moment. And once the map loads, it shows a radius that is centralised around your school. So as I said, this is in Liverpool, and we have a 5-mile radius currently showing. But you can extend this by clicking on this drop down here and clicking on 10 or 25. Those filters will depend on where your school is. If you have a more rural school, those filters might be larger, so you might have larger miles. If you're in more of a town or a city, it might be that little bit shorter, so not to overwhelm you when you're searching. We then have all of these filters available to you here that are very easy and flexible for you to use. We have lots of different sectors of volunteers available on the platform, across from zoologists, engineers. We have great STEM ambassadors on the platform. We have lots of volunteers from the NHS. We have a partnership with Health Education England. So there are volunteers from across all avenues in that area. We also have great partnership with Maritime UK. So there are lots of volunteers available from them as well as many other individual volunteers that sign up from across the world of work. So as you can see here, we have lots of different sectors that you could potentially choose from. And then we also have these other filters. So whether or not a volunteer is able to talk about apprenticeships, any other specialist topics, such as inclusion and diversity, working with a disability, gender, so whether or not they're able to talk about tackling gender stereotypes within their job role, recruitment skills, and you can also specify anything else that you'd like to add. Whether or not they took a vocational route, so if they went to university or if they did something a little bit different to get into their current job role. You can also search by subject, so very similar to the school subjects that you may see in school, and also languages as well, so the kind of language that they may be able to speak about using within their job role. You can also search by a specific job title and search for a name of somebody if you know somebody that is signed up to the platform that you would like to invite to your activity as well. When you click on this button here, you're able to search for virtual volunteers. So at the moment, it's showing everybody that's in person and able to come to an activity in person. But when you click virtual and click search, it will then come up with everybody that is able to volunteer virtually as well. So if I were to invite somebody to an in-person activity, the first thing I would do is open up one of these clusters here. These numbers are clusters of location pins, and there is a key to these location pins just underneath the map to let you know what you're looking at and what the different colours mean. You can then click on one of these location pins and it will tell you the name of the volunteer, their job title, the company they work for, and any subjects that they feel are relevant to their job role. When you click on view profile, you can then see a little bit more information about their role, so any subjects they use and a little bit more information about their job. It's up to a volunteer how much or how little information they give on their job roles, so it is worth having a little explore and seeing who is in your local area to invite into your school. So once you've had a little look around and you've had a look at a couple of volunteers and you find one that you're particularly interested in, the next step is to add them to your shortlist. You can do that by clicking add to shortlist here. And when you scroll up, you can see this light green button in the top hand corner that says view shortlist and the number of volunteers that you currently have in your shortlist. At the moment, you can add up to 49 volunteers at any time. After that, it will say that there's an error in inviting. So if you want to invite more than 49 volunteers, which we wouldn't advise anyway, because that's quite a few people to speak to and make sure you're responding to accepted volunteers and making sure you're giving out all of the right information. If you wanted to invite any more than that, you'd have to do it in blocks of, say, 49 volunteers at a time. So once you've added people to your shortlist, you can then view it and it will tell you their job role again and any of the sectors that they're available to. And then you can go into a short invite message from here and it will ask you to say something short and personal. You don't have to repeat any of the information that's in the description because they'll have that available to them as well. But you can say who you are, when you're hoping for them to get back to you and how you're looking to talk to them. So whether it's through our chat function or if you'd like them to message you so that you can send them your email address as well. So if a volunteer messages you, you'll be able to see that in the chat page here. So at the moment, there are no messages here, but when a volunteer messages you, it will come up with the subject of the volunteer's message and the volunteer's name, and the message will appear in this box here. And you can respond using a little chat box that will open the bottom here. So if you do get confused, you also always have availability to email us at inquiries@inspiringthefuture.org, and I'm sure that will be available to you at the end of this PowerPoint, and we can also send that across to you as well. But if you do need some quick help with using the platform and you don't feel like emailing us straight away, when you go to the homepage, there is this how-to guides button here. And when you click on that, there are lots of available resources to help you get started in creating your encounter on the platform. So ideas and inspirations for potential encounters, specific information on careers insights or speed networking or mock interviews. We also have how to speak to volunteers. This all will be changing at some point. So we are currently in the process of updating the platform, and there will be 4 steps instead of 5. So that's something to quickly note. And then we have some reflection here as well. So that's all from me, and I'll hand over to you, Leonor.
Great, thank you so much. Just to also clarify, there's 2 ways to view volunteers. So there's the map that Rebecca showed you, and there's also a list view that can be seen just at the top as well. I personally find that a little bit easier when I'm looking for volunteers. But yeah, thank you so much, Rebecca. So yeah, as Rebecca also mentioned, just in terms of some of the partnerships that we have a number of partnerships such as Bank of America, Maritime UK, Health Education England, BNP Paribas, Amazon Web Services, GCHQ, and ITV. So for our partnership with NHS Health Education England, we have such a great range of volunteers with them, such as surgeons, speech and language therapists, facilities managers, and lead nurses. There are actually over 350 different types of jobs in the NHS. And we have around 1,300 volunteers from the NHS Health Services that have signed up through our NHS Ambassadors programme as well. So we have a really great range of NHS volunteers on the system across the UK. With Maritime UK, we have volunteers such as pilots, and they're people that help dock the really big ships. We have geophysical managers. We also have mechanical engineers with over 200 maritime volunteers registered as well, and they're also called Maritime Ambassadors. For Bank of America, we have volunteers such as software managers, treasury, service advisors, and research analysts. AWS for jobs in tech, and really interesting being able to talk about sort of future jobs as well. We have technical account managers, area managers, and also solution architects. So that's just a flavour of some of the really diverse jobs and sectors that you can connect with through our platform as well. So next I have a couple of case studies. I'm just conscious of time, so I'll go through these really quickly. So these are some in-person activities that we've seen up on the system, and they just are really interesting ways to connect with volunteers, such as this panel careers discussion, where volunteers were invited to take part in a debate-style careers panel. I think they had around 5 volunteers, and they were sat at the front of the class, and the teacher facilitated discussion by asking questions to the volunteers who either gave like opinions or advice related to the questions. The questions were also brainstormed by the students prior to the panel in a sort of pre-encounter activity, but the students were also given the space to ask follow-up questions that they might have had for the volunteers. So through Inspiring the Future, the teacher was able to connect with a self-employed events planner, a software engineer, and also a financial advisor. So a second case study I'll just talk you through quickly was a business breakfast that we saw in a school in Suffolk. They invited volunteers to have breakfast with the students and then to give a short talk to the class about their career journey. This one was specifically in the business sector for students who were studying sort of business related subjects. So they started the session off with their business breakfast and had space for an informal careers talk. And then the volunteers gave a presentation to the class on their sector and careers pathway. So through Inspiring the Future, the teacher was able to connect with a self-employed artist, a connectivity director at BT, and also a policy advisor at DEFRA. It's definitely a really interesting range of volunteers. So just before we finish the session, I do have some top tips for you all to take away. Definitely invite volunteers in enough time. depending on the length of the activity, definitely around 4 to 6 weeks, we advise in creating your activity and sending the invites out, especially if volunteers are going to need to apply for something like annual leave. Use the search filters for subject and make it also obvious in your description that you want to emphasize how a volunteer uses that subject in their work. You can make multiple activities on Inspiring the Future for different encounters, so don't try and fit them all into one encounter, as that can sometimes be a little bit confusing for the volunteer and sort of what's expected for them. Another top tip is to start off with an activity involving just 1 or 2 volunteers and work your way up to bigger activities. A few more tips. Be specific in what you'd like the volunteers to do or talk about, and let them know if there's any certain areas you'd like them to cover. Give volunteers background into your school and what to expect. Let them know if they can make any special provisions for your students, or if there's any special requirements or any special needs of your students, so that they can tailor the talks to benefit students the most. And then finally, multiple teachers from any school can have an account. So this means, for example, that curriculum teachers can connect with volunteers and arrange short careers track activities to really embed that into their lessons, and also to meet Gatsby benchmark 4. So what's next? So log into your account, create an encounter and invite volunteers. And then if you'd like any extra support, you're more than welcome to book in a meeting with me, and we can go through the activity and plan it together as well. So before I go on to sort of answering any questions that you guys might have, I do have a quick poll questionnaire, if you would be able to fill that out. I think my colleague will launch the poll questions. Jude, you might have to let me know because I can't see. Okay, great. So yeah, just a couple of questions if you don't mind answering. So did this webinar help you to understand how to use Inspiring the Future to connect with in-person volunteers? How confident do you feel in creating an encounter on Inspiring the Future? Do you think Inspiring the Future could help you meet Gatsby benchmarks 3 to 7? Do you know how to contact the team if you need support? And also, when do you plan on creating an encounter on Inspiring the Future? And so Jude, if you could just let me know. Okay, great. We're not going to publish the results, so please do feel free to answer them. Okay, Jude, I think you can probably stop the poll now. Okay, great. Great, thanks, Jude. So on the next slide. Yeah, so thank you so much, firstly, for giving up your time and joining us today for this webinar. I do hope it has been helpful. Just in case you weren't sure how to get in contact with us, there are a few ways here. So you can email inquiries at inspiringthefuture.org, or you can also email me directly at leonore.markswalsum@educationandemployers.org as well. So please do feel free to contact us if you do have any questions.